You're listening to Expertly Said, a podcast on the art and impact of communication. I'm Kristen Sweeney, founder and CEO of Every Little Word. My guest today is Kristen Oeltjen-Bruns. Kristen has over 25 years of experience in the medical communications industry, leading with innovation and vision. In 2025, Kristen was appointed U.S. President of Ashfield Medical Communications, where she leads the organization's U.S. business, guiding strategy, growth, and operational excellence across the network. Prior to joining Ashfield, Kristen held a series of senior leadership roles within global medical communications organizations, where she oversaw large multidisciplinary teams and led organizational transformations. She's passionate about building organizations where teams feel seen, valued, and inspired, and where clients view the agency as a true extension of their own. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kristen. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for the conversation today.
Likewise, and always great to be with a fellow Kristen, of course.
Thank you.
Would love to start with our kind of standard question about your origin story. So we heard a little bit about your current role at Ashfield, but I would love to know how you got into communications in the first place. Was that something you always wanted to do?
Definitely not. My goal as a young, I would say, teenager, leading up to the time going to college, I had intended to study law. And the summer before my senior year of college, I was afforded, kind of just by chance, an opportunity to work in the marketing department as an intern at a technology company. And it was my first real exposure, to the business world, to marketing, because I was studying literature in college for comprehension and writing skills to prepare for law school. But that intern experience pretty much changed the trajectory of my life. Knew that I wanted to do something more aligned to marketing, working with teams of people. And so I went back to college and finished my senior year and then picked up and moved to New Jersey without a job and landed a role through attending a job fair at a medical publisher. And I worked there for a short period of time, 1 year, and was recruited into medical communications from there at an entry-level role as a project coordinator, I think was my title at the time. So that's really how
Wow.
I got into medical communications. I genuinely fell into the career that I'm so passionate about and have been working at for over 25 years now.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. It
Yeah.
really, usually my follow-up is, and how did you get into the medical side? But it seems like that was kind of part and parcel from really the earliest days of your career.
Yeah, it
Uh,
really was. I just fell into it.
so let me ask a different question then. What is it about medical communication specifically that has led you to build your career in this space?
I'll answer that in two parts. I think in the early days of my career, I was really energized and inspired by the people around me. And I mean mostly my colleagues at the time. It's a high energy environment working in, an agency. This was the early 2000s. And people are just incredibly bright and so committed and passionate to the work. And then, also had the opportunity to work with clients who are building strategies to bring medicine closer to patients. And that was also, a great experience as a young person to see what it looks like on the pharma or biotech side. So it was really, I think in the early formative parts of my career about the people that I was working with day to day. But as, my career progressed, I actually started to really connect the impact of the work
Mm.
to patients, and how many of the medicines, that I've been a part of in the most minuscule way have this massive impact to treat somebody's disease, their cancer. I've worked a lot in the oncology space, and then later in life that became very personal for me. And it just reiterates, not for me directly, my husband, but it reiterates how important the work is that we do and how it's important to make sure that our messages to HCPs or patients or whoever our end
Mhm.
stakeholder is that it's, that we get it right. And so, yeah, that's a two-part answer for me.
Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
evolved over time. But both still remain true today.
Yeah.
And that's what gets me out of bed every day is the people that I work with and the reason that we're doing the work.
Yeah. I love that. I'm curious if there's a particular moment that comes to mind when you felt that impact really resonate, maybe directly tied to your work, maybe not of, hey, what I'm doing, it's you said like I'm a part of something that's really, really helping people.
I think there's been so many of those moments
Yeah.
over the years, having worked on, various products myself, before really going into more leadership and management. So I've had lots of those experience. Actually, there was one experience in particular. I was working in Alzheimer's disease, which was not a space I had worked in previously. I'd spent a good part of my career in oncology, and was working with a very highly regarded world expert. And we were at a satellite symposium, and he shared with me that he was actually the physician for the real Rain Man, the movie,
Yeah.
and shared a little bit about that with me. And I, of course, had seen the movie many, many times.
Yeah.
And then to realize, that this gentleman that I had been working so closely with for several months at that point, was directly connected to this kind of enigma that we've seen on the big screen. And, so that was a major connection point for me.
Yeah.
Kind of a strange story, but it was a very inspiring moment.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really cool. I think all of us who, no matter how directly or indirectly we kind of touch life sciences, I get to hear a lot of stories like that
Yeah.
from folks. I spend a lot of my time interviewing executives and experts and to help shape some of their communications. And
There was
it,
another, if I can just share, there was
yeah,
another experience
absolutely.
that's just coming to mind as we're talking about it. I was working on an awareness campaign for kidney transplant. And the awareness campaign was specifically targeted to young African Americans. And we did kind of a bit of a roadshow, if you will, where we went to several HBCU colleges and
Yeah.
universities. And it was a collaboration with a pharmaceutical company and the American Red Cross. And
Nice.
it was to understand their beliefs about donating blood and also signing up to become an organ donor. And part of the process was, educational for them. For us, it was collecting their beliefs. And then we partnered with somebody who had played in the NBA who had a mother who was the recipient of a live kidney donor, and did a video. And it was this massive, campaign that we had worked on. But going and interacting with the students, and trying to understand some of the beliefs that they had, which were, really far off from what was scientifically sound, was a really um, eye-opening experience to how important that education and communication is. And I like to believe that it was a very impactful program for all
Yeah.
of them. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And also really kind of, putting your money where your mouth is when it's like
Mhm.
listening and
Yeah.
learning. And I mean, when you said a road show, I definitely thought that was going to be a campaign, right? And when
Yeah.
you were like to understand what they thought, like wow, there's real budget and resources behind that, and
Yes.
so I'm sure that made an impact too.
Yeah.
Um,
Great.
I I want to. You've got strong. I think is your full background is in agency, right?
Yes. I've
Yes.
spent
Okay. So,
except for that 1 year at the publisher,
the
I've
one
been
year that kicked it
at
all
the
off.
agency, yes,
Yeah.
on the agency
Um,
side.
you talk about wanting to be part of organizations to help clients view agencies as an extension of the team.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what that really means for you. I think that is a often aspired to and commonly heard phrase.
Sure.
But as someone who's been deeply embedded in agency life, uh, would love to hear like how does an agency really accomplish that, more beyond kind of lip service?
I think it's really about forming a relationship and trust with your client partners. And oftentimes that's not just one person. You know, in the early days of my career, it was really just one person who would then kind of have all of the communications with their stakeholders
Yeah.
internally and be working. But that model has really evolved. You know, so it's being really intentional in forming in forming the relationships, not with just with your immediate client, but with the team around them. Becoming, becoming a trusted partner is, about open communication, honest communication. Asking questions, I think, is a really important thing, especially at the beginning of a relationship. But questions that are smart and intentional, not questions that you should be able to answer on your own by doing a little bit of,
Oh,
research.
yes.
So you have to find the right balance of not becoming a nuisance, and I think if you can achieve those things, and the chemistry is really important as well. I think it's not something that is often acknowledged or really talked about, but I do think in my experience where I have been on really strong teams is where the chemistry is really great within the team and
Mhm.
then also with the client, and the client team. And that trust and kind of going the extra mile really goes a long way for the relationship and doing what you say you're going to do. And if you're not able to
Yeah.
do it, proactively communicating the barriers and or the reasons why. Um, so I think that those are some of the key things that I certainly put at the forefront of my approach to building new relationships and what I encourage my teams to do as well.
Yeah. I love that. I agree relationships are it took me a while in my career to understand the importance of the relationships I was building. I think just my personality, I kind of for a long time thought just like it's about the work. It's about the work I produce and it's about how good that is. And, you know, it kind of gets graded, right? Like and that's kind of the make
Yeah,
or break. And realizing over time that it's about all the steps along the way and how those decisions get made together and whether, you know, because the truth is you can't get everything perfectly right all the time.
right.
And so the relationship is what determines how it goes when things go wrong.
Yes,
And whether that's like we're in it together, working to fix it, or whether it's kind of like my agency screwed up and now I'm kind
yeah.
of reframing my opinion of them.
I'm a big believer that when you do something wrong, you need to acknowledge it, apologize for it, and identify how you're going to correct it and do your best to ensure it won't happen again. Um, but I think, hopefully we don't have too many of those situations. But when you do, I think it's important to own them and own them quickly.
You've just
Otherwise,
outlined the exact policy we have documented in an SOP called When Things Go Wrong. It is that
there you
exact
have it.
process. So,
Yep.
that's
It's a
because we're both
principle
named Kristen. Yes.
not just for work, but for life in general.
Yes.
So I think it's a good one. Maybe I'll put it in the family SOP.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Trying to teach my 11-year-old those philosophies.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit before we recorded, and we were talking about, working with experts. Obviously, in medical communications, you're having a lot, you were creating for experts, you're working with experts. And although you may not be as involved in the day to day in your current role, what's the approach you've kind of found effective over the years? And what do you find is still maybe challenging about those
Mhm.
collaborations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the privileges in working in the industry that we work in is that oftentimes the experts outside of our client relationships that we have, the HCP experts, these are world renowned researchers and physicians, and there's a lot of demand on their time, and many of them also have clinical obligations, and they're actively treating patients. So I think the strategies that we tend to really align to is proactively communicating expectations and understanding if they have barriers, due to their scheduling or their professional needs or even personal needs in some situations, and making sure that that open line of communication is there. Understanding preferences in terms of communication is important. Not everybody wants to know that they need to review something via email because they're too busy and they have 500 emails that are waiting to be read. So, kind of understanding individual nuances, that proactive communication about setting expectations around timelines, proactively communicating if something changes, sending reminders, I think is an important approach to how we engage with our experts. And then I think just remembering these experts are also human beings. They
Yeah.
forget things, they make mistakes, they make major, revelations sometimes. At the end of the day, they are the expert. We have to respect, their opinion, even if, we want to frame something differently, we have to follow their guidance. But they're human. They're human beings. And I remember when I was, much earlier in my career, I used to feel quite intimidated when I would be on site with HCPs, and I had to do a lot of communication with them at that time, and a lot of, walking them from one area to another.
Hmm.
And finally, I just said, Dr. McMahon is a dad just like my dad is. And I started to really build personal connections to them. I
Yeah.
just started asking them things other than about their work. These are for experts that I was, consistently engaging with in
Hmm.
particular. So, just treating them like they're a human being and provide them with the things that you would want to be provided with to be successful, and to have an impact in whatever it is that they've committed to.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. I think whatever for you, the way you've described is great. They are human beings. I think how it to me what that does, and I think this is important, is it makes you more peer or same level. I think it's actually challenging to get what you need if you've got someone on sort of such a high pedestal and you're this supplicant, like, please give me your time, please. Um, I know that's how it feels sometimes,
Yes, for
realistically,
sure.
but at least once you're in front of them to have that, we are both experts. We are both here to get what we need. What I find is when I'm able to do that, and I think in some ways my performing background and you know, having shared a stage with Broadway actors and at the same time, like, they might be sort of the lowest status person on stage, and so you've kind of all just gotta focus on what the work needs. It allows me to feel confident asking questions when I need to and confirming my understanding and not being sort of scared or needing to be in a
Yeah.
performative space the whole time, and at the end of the day, you're both there to serve the communication goal, and that is the attitude I find an approach that is gonna get that done more effectively.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, unfortunately, you do run into people sometimes they're not as receptive, to that, and you just have to learn to manage that,
Yep.
get what you need to get from that
Yeah.
person, and not take it personal, I think is,
Yeah.
the important part, which I think can be particularly challenging for people who are in the earlier parts of their
Sure.
career,
Sure.
to understand that it isn't personal, if somebody doesn't want to engage, beyond, what they need to tell you.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Can you tell us a little bit more about your transition to leadership? And, we're just hearing people as this super strong through line, like, why you made the decision to transition into a leadership role, um, which obviously by its nature takes you a little more away from the day-to-day work, and what's really important to you in leading teams? You've got a lot of experience in this area.
sure. I think it's important to acknowledge that I knew from day one of my professional career that I was going to want to be in a leadership role eventually.
Oh, good for you.
That I
Yeah.
would have to put the work in to get there.
Mhm.
But leading groups of people has always been something I love doing even as a kid. So it's just kind of very much embedded in who I am as a person. So I knew that I was gonna have to put in the work, and I worked really, really hard to learn as much as I could, um, to build a network of people, and to make sure that I was surrounded by people who I trusted and inspired me. And as a result of those things, and working hard, I was afforded leadership opportunities very early on in my career, probably, within the first I think 6 to 7 years of
Wow.
my career, I
Mhm.
became responsible for a department.
Wow.
I worked for a small agency, so I was not working in a big organization. So you gotta do a lot of things in a small organization. But for me, that was one of the best things that happened during my career was being part of a very, very small boutique agency because everybody rolled up their sleeves. We were all in it together. But my management team saw how hard I worked and they afforded me that opportunity. And then that small company was bought by a large holding company where I became exposed to, you know, a lot of people and made a lot
Mhm.
of contacts, and I managed that network, and stayed in touch with people, over periods of time, and, it just kind of I just kept applying those same principles, and then I did eventually move to another company, that was larger in nature but independently held, and applied the same principles, just kept working really hard, worked on forming relationships, did what I said I was gonna do, took accountability if I made a mistake, or got something wrong, took accountability for that. And, over time, um, I was approached by them, and that was really my first opportunity to lead an agency.
Wow.
Funny enough, after a little bit of time, I'm back to that very same agency group now, different name,
Wow.
but it's
Yeah.
in the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
network that I work with now. And again, like a lot of that comes back to just continuing to work hard, but maintaining um, the network of people, that you meet throughout your career journey. It's
Yeah.
important,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I
I
think
love
that
that.
sometimes people don't put enough effort in maintaining relationships, with
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
And that is something that I work really hard at.
And something we're gonna talk about specifically in our one big idea section in just a second here.
Sure.
Uh, Before we get there, I wanted to ask you, I know that transparency is something that is um, quite important to you and something that you think a lot about as a leader. Can you talk a little bit about why you value transparency and how you navigate that as um, someone leading a team where you've got access to a lot of sensitive financial and otherwise information about the
Sure.
business and um, how much transparency is the right amount of transparency, I guess.
Yes. Transparency is important to me, certainly. And that has always been important to me in my career. So I was, even in very junior roles, raising my hand in town halls and asking questions that I know other people were thinking about because we were talking about it, but nobody was asking about.
Mhm.
And I think I have learned that while transparency is important to me, it's as important to the people that are working around me in my group. And it's important to have transparency for trust. And, a
Mhm.
lot of when you're leading a larger organization, you are not afforded the opportunity to spend a lot of one-on-one time with individuals to
Right.
build relationships. Many people that are working in my agency have very limited interaction with me, maybe 1 to 2 times a month.
Mhm.
So when I am with them, I need to make sure that I'm providing them with the information they need to know that they are working in an agency where we have their best interest at heart, that I'm sharing how we're performing financially, where we're focusing, what are the priorities for the agency so that they understand why decisions are being made the way that they are. Um, you know, and also making sure that there's a constant feedback loop. So I may not be interacting with them one on one, but I do make efforts if somebody shares with me that there's some concern about A, B, and C, I will often send an email to address it, to put those concerns to rest or address the concerns if they're actually
Mhm.
valid concerns. I frequently tell people I really very much believe in an open door policy. And in my case, I have a virtual open door, but
Yeah.
if anyone in my organization reaches out to me, I will always prioritize meeting with them one on one, and making sure that I'm timely in communicating with them. And I think that you need that level of transparency for your employees, again, to, bring it back to that
Mhm.
trust. And if they trust their leaders, they're going to bring their best to work almost
Yeah.
every day. I mean, nobody's perfect and we all have off days.
Sure.
Some days you can't bring your best to work. Um, but most days I feel that the people on my teams do bring their very best to work, and they're really
Yeah.
passionate and great at what they do. And it's my responsibility to make sure that I continue to feed that engine and help them to feel
Mhm.
empowered, to grow and have an impact in their role.
Yeah,
So,
I love that, and I love the connection of that to trust because I think there are times as leaders where we do have to maybe, like, make withdrawals from that
mhm.
trust bank, you know what
Yes.
I mean? Or ask for things that are hard or make decisions that are difficult, and, I think what you're talking about is building the goodwill and making continuous deposits into that trust bank, so
Yeah.
you've got some you can do what's needed when sometimes there are things that may challenge or push or, um not be what our teams would
Yes.
wholeheartedly endorse, at least at
I
first, but they can give a little grace.
I think that you raise a really important point, because I think a lot of people in general feel that leadership is a really glamorous job. And in fact, it's leadership is about making hard decisions that are often, not often, but sometimes are not going to be popular, or
Yeah.
people may not fully understand. And there's only a certain level of transparency you can provide around the decision.
Mhm. Yeah.
And of course, like any human being, find that the hardest part of leadership. And so I have to, be really intentional about channeling those emotions and how
Yeah.
I manage, those things so that I'm showing up trying to bring my best every
Mhm.
day, even
Mhm.
if I'm struggling with some of the hard decisions, that have to
Yeah.
be made because it, will impact somebody in a negative way or, whatever it might be.
Right.
So
Right.
that's something we don't often talk about in leadership, but for me, the emotional burden can sometimes feel really, really heavy.
Yeah.
Um, because, I form a connection of some sort. And I think, some people might feel that it's a little bit cheesy, but that's just the way I am. I wear my heart on my sleeve and I'm
Mhm.
really invested in wanting people to really love their job and enjoy their job. And I, I feel very responsible for that.
Yeah.
Um, and, how I manage the environment that they're in through transparency, for example, is one way that I can help contribute to a really good experience for them. So,
Yeah. And I think it's probably true that the part where it feels hard and sticky and difficult is how you know you're still human and
mhm. Yeah.
at the same
Oh, yeah.
time, it's just kind of part of it's just part and parcel of it, and it's like, okay, if this were too easy for me, then maybe that would be more distressing, actually.
Yes, I
Um,
would completely agree with that. That's a red
s
flag.
yeah,
And yeah,
yeah. So,
time
we've
to
talked
upgrade.
about leadership, and I think this is a great segue, into our one big idea. This is where we dig a little bit deeper into one particular area or topic. And we're going to talk about remote work, which
Yes.
you and I kind of talked about this. Both of us have a long history with working remotely. I work fully remotely. I think your agency is fully
Yes.
remote.
Fully remote.
And of course, since the pandemic, although at least weekly, someone can't do something on Zoom still, including me, like, but we are all acquainted with what it means to interact virtually. But I think, this is a timely conversation because what we talked about is really how you build and maintain a culture remotely. And I think that's something that organizations really are still very much grappling with. And we see that in the increase in return to office policies, even several years after COVID, is kind of the having trouble
Yeah.
uniting their team. So I know you've been quite intentional about this. Can you share a little bit about maybe challenges along the way? What works for you now?
Sure. I think the biggest challenge in remote environments is that, and especially where you're working in team-based environment, which is the model, that my agency works in. So I have, 160 people, but they're working across 20 or 30 different teams, and they're only really working and interacting with the same people every day on
Mm,
Zoom, which is very different from being in an office experience with 160 people, and you're still interacting with the same 5 or 6 people, but you're sitting next to different individuals, you're talking to people in the break room. So we don't have any of those types of connectivity. So the connectivity across the organization is important, and finding the right balance and what excites people or drives people to engage. So there's a couple of different ways that we focus on that. We have a culture committee in our organization that basically organizes socials, for people that are optional, and not everybody feels the need to connect with people outside
yeah,
of
sure.
their team. And that's why some people love the remote environment, because
Hmm.
they don't necessarily, have a desire to be engaging with 150 people. But we do, we have that as one of the mechanisms. We do a monthly all agency meeting where we come together and we talk about, obviously, the overall state of the agency, but different things that are happening around the agency with various teams. We talk about some of the technologies that our company is investing in and what that means. We do general HR overviews. One of the things that my agency does is we talk about our own patient stories. Many of us are impacted by lots of diseases in our lives and in
Yeah.
our families. So we have people who share those stories in some of our agency meetings. So that that monthly touch point is important. Our line managers have biweekly one-on-ones, with their direct reports. So just
Yeah.
making sure that there's a constant stream of communications and touch points has been really important. And one of the things that we're looking to explore this week is, or not this week, I'm sorry, this year. It's on my mind because we've been talking about it this week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is bringing people together that live in general areas around the country. So we have a cohort of 6 or 8 people who live in the Chicago area. We have about 10 people that live by Raleigh, North Carolina. So we're going to set up some mechanisms for those people to be able to get
Nice.
together, and form those connections as well. So just trying to bring, that human element back to the work environment, I
Hmm.
think is something that I have always prioritized working in the remote environment. And I make sure that I try to be present at all of those things.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
honestly, it feeds me as a leader. I want to
Hmm.
know the people that are working in my team. Just this week, or the past 2 weeks, I've been working on a big RFP submission, and I've got to spend, some time with people that I haven't really been able to engage with yet. And I'm so excited to have them as part of my team, having
Yeah.
spent this time with them over the last 2 weeks. So, for me as well, it's a really valuable investment.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the kind of bringing it back to real life, in person where it makes sense and having those opportunities. Because I think that's the thing that is most lost is the hallway chatter, right?
Yeah.
And it can be challenging to create the right environment for that to feel like it's spontaneous because we do have to, like, hop on,
Yeah.
like it's not just a part of how
I
you go
do
through the day.
I do think it's important to acknowledge that some of the work that you can do in person requires a lot more attention and time working remotely. It's particularly when we're working on big strategic type of work. It's most effective really to be in a boardroom together.
Yeah.
But we don't have that ability. So, figuring out how to use different technology tools, the cadence of what those sessions need to look like,
Mhm.
creating the space for that without interruption at home is quite different than creating space in an office without interruption.
Mhm.
So, I think it does require a certain level of discipline by the individuals, which can sometimes be hard, for people and
Yes.
myself included.
Yes. It's very interesting. I've kind of encountered, I would say I've been remote about 15 years, really long time, like definitely before it was cool. And I encountered sort of f- ranges within myself, but in general, I'm not someone who's like, I spent more time doing laundry today than working. I am
Yeah,
someone
no.
who throws in the load of laundry and then 6 hours later has to rewash it because I got caught up in work. Um,
Yeah,
but I definitely do notice when something is hard, the brain hurting work, it's a lot easier in my home to just like get up and wander, like
yes,
suddenly be distracted versus if I was in an environment where this is what we're doing right now.
right.
So I think that's definitely an area where I have to kind of bring back that discipline. Yeah.
It is important to have the discipline, but also to remind yourself to like get up and move,
Yeah.
and take a
Yes.
stretch, take a walk around the block or whatever, whereas when you're in the office, you are moving around a little bit more. Your walk to the bathroom is a little bit longer, for
Longer.
example.
Yeah.
Your
Yep.
walk to the lunchroom is longer. You're not parking and, walking. So there are just some things that I think you need to be conscious, super aware of. For me personally, like I have a very specific routine in the morning. I never go to work in pajamas or anything like
Mhm.
that. I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
misconceptions
Yeah.
about that, and I know that the people on my team don't because I see them on
Yeah.
camera. And
Yes.
I was gonna let me just add. I think an on-camera policy is really important to remote working environment. um, and of course, I think you need to have some flexibility and grace, for people. But I do think in the agencies, I've worked in three different groups in a remote environment as a leader, and when we have an on-camera policy, people are more engaged. So I do
100%.
think that that's a very important part of a remote work environment.
We're a much smaller team than yours, but we're the same. Like the default and almost all the time is definitely cameras on, and then if cameras off, it might be because you're doing something for 5 minutes or maybe occasionally if you're sick, but at that point, like maybe don't come to the
Right?
meeting.
Yeah.
Um, and I think one of the things that strikes me about some of the camera off policies, I've got some good friends who have that, and I'm always like, if you can be camera off and doing other work, did you really need to be on that meeting in the first
That's
place?
an excellent point. I think I will have to steal that for any reminders that come up. I tend to see
Yeah.
cameras off in large meetings, not
Yes,
so much in the
exactly,
small
exactly.
meetings, but I really want to know that people are engaged and listening,
Yeah,
to the discussions. So I really encourage that camera on
yeah,
approach.
yeah.
So
Appreciate the insights on this.
yeah,
I wanna move us to the last word. This is our lightning round segment.
okay,
So 5 quick questions. Every guest gets the same 5. Are you ready, Kristen?
I'm ready.
Question 1, what's your favorite word to say out loud?
One that's not appropriate for this podcast.
Excellent, I love it. Question 2, what's a word you know from reading, but you're afraid to say out loud because you're not quite sure how to pronounce it?
Oh, I know how to pronounce it, I just always struggle to say the
Yep.
word rural, and I
Oh,
have since I'm a kid. So if I see that word, I can't believe I've actually just said it on the podcast. I panic a little bit. I just really struggle to say with it
Yeah.
since I'm a kid. It's not a
It's a little
direct answer to your
slurry for me too.
question, but
Like,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. Love it.
um, or anything scientific, like highly scientific.
Oh, good thing your job doesn't really, you know,
Well, I'm not a
re-
scientist, and I'm very open about that. I work with a lot of scientists who I will then say, "How do I pronounce this, and can you tell me what it means and help me
yeah.
understand it?"
Yeah.
So, I'm lucky to have those resources.
Yeah. Excellent. What's one phrase or saying you wish could be retired for good?
Let's circle back
Let's not.
over that one.
Is it the phrase or is it the idea? Are you like, let's make a
Um,
decision now?
I it's the phrase because I think people default to it when they don't know how to respond.
Yeah.
So,
Just kind of
that's
kicking the
why
can. Yeah.
I don't know how to address that right now. So, yeah, I'll kick the can down the road, so let's circle back.
If you had to say that instead, it might be, a little
Yeah.
more.
I'd prefer somebody to say, "I don't know the answer to that. Can I come back to you?"
Yeah.
That's how I wonder if
More,
I mean, I probably say, "Let's circle back," and don't even realize it, to be honest. I don't know.
yeah. More
Maybe
transparent. Yeah.
yeah, maybe
I don't
some
know the
of
answer.
the viewers of this podcast, if they know me, can let us know if I say, "Let's circle back," or not.
Great. What's a communication practice or principle that's non-negotiable for you?
There's several, but probably honesty is a non-negotiable for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we talked a lot about that during
Yeah.
the podcast today. Um, if you're not honest, that's a deal breaker for me.
Yeah.
So, and I
And what's
would
the last
expect people to have the same expectation of me.
yeah. What's the last thing you read, heard, or watched that really stuck with you?
Um, I watch a lot of true crime and I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts.
Okay.
So
Great.
I've been listening to many of the seasons of Serial right now.
Ah,
Um, and the last thing that I read, gosh, I'm a reader, but I guess it's been a while. I think I'd have to look at my Audible. I should
yeah.
have prepared for that one. I don't
That's all right.
remember.
All
But
good.
I am listening to Serial and all of the episodes in or I'm sorry, the seasons in
Yeah.
Serial and really
Yeah.
enjoying that. When I'm not working, when I'm in the car or maybe
Mhm.
doing some chores around the house, I'm mostly listening to a book or podcast. And right now I'm on a big podcast kick.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
yes.
Excellent. Kristen, thank you so much for joining us today. If our listeners want to learn more about you, where can they go to find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. My last name I will spell because it's a difficult one is Oeltjen hyphen Bruns.
You've done that
Find
before.
me there. Yes, I definitely have.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate this conversation.
Thanks, Kristen. I really enjoyed being here. Thanks so much.
That's it for this episode of Expertly Said, produced by Every Little Word. If you liked what you heard, please support us by subscribing, sharing the episode with a colleague, or leaving a review. If you want to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Kristen Sweeney. And if you'd like more insights on communication and content, subscribe to our newsletter using the link in the show description. Thanks for listening. Talk soon.